Have you ever suffered from imposter syndrome? You know, that nagging, sweaty feeling that you absolutely do not belong in your job or your relationship or that fancy restaurant where the menu doesn't have prices? That terrifying, creeping dread that eventually someone is going to find out you're basically 3 raccoons in a trench coat masquerading as a functional adult? Well, I want you to take that feeling, wad it up into a tiny ball, and throw it straight into the trash. Because today we are talking about a man who didn't just conquer imposter syndrome. He took imposter syndrome, shoved it in a locker, stole its lunch money, and then confidently declared himself the ruler of the free world. Welcome to Audacious History. I'm your host, and today we're talking about the absolute peak of fake it till you make it. We're talking about Joshua Abraham Norton, the man who, in 1859, woke up, looked around, and decided he was Emperor of the United States and the Protector of Mexico. And the wildest part? The entire bustling city of San Francisco just went along with it for 21 fucking years. Grab a drink, take a seat on your entirely fabricated throne, and let's get into it. To understand how a man can literally gaslight an entire city into treating him like royalty, you first have to understand the city. San Francisco in the 1850s was not the tech bro, overpriced latte utopia we know today. It was the gold rush. It was the Wild West. It was a city populated almost entirely by heavily armed men who had abandoned their families to go dig in the dirt because they heard rumors about shiny rocks. The place was lawless. It burned down practically every other Tuesday, and the entire economy was essentially a giant casino powered by whiskey, syphilis, and pure unfiltered desperation. Enter Joshua Norton. Born in England, raised in South Africa, Norton arrived in San Francisco in 1849 with a reported $40,000 to his name. Now, in 1849 money, 40 grand made you a baller. You didn't even need to pan for gold. You just bought the land, sold the shovels, and built the real estate. And that's exactly what Norton did. He became a highly respected businessman. He built cigar factories, he built a rice mill, he bought prime real estate. He was part of the city's elite vigilance committee, which was basically just a bunch of rich dudes who decided they were the cops now. He was rich, he was respected, and he was sane. But as any good dramatic history story will tell you, hubris is a bitch. And for Joshua Norton, hubris came in the form of rice. In 1852, China was facing a severe famine, which caused the price of rice in San Francisco to skyrocket. We are talking insane markups. 9 cents a pound jumping to 36 cents a pound in a matter of months. Norton, looking at the market, decided it was time to pull a boss move. He heard that a ship called the Glide was coming into port from Peru, carrying 200,000 pounds of rice. Norton got dollar signs in his eyes. He thought, if I buy this entire ship's cargo, I will corner the rice market. I will literally be the rice king of San Francisco. I will control the carbs. So he signed a contract to buy the whole damn lot for $25,000. He put his money down, rubbed his hands together, and waited for the cash to roll in. But here is a fundamental rule of economics that Norton completely forgot. The ocean is really, really big, and there are lots of ships on it. Almost immediately after Norton signed the contract, another ship arrived from Peru, full of rice. And then another ship, and another. Suddenly, San Francisco wasn't starved for rice, it was practically drowning in it. The market absolutely cratered. The price plummeted from 36 cents back down to 3 cents a pound. Norton was ruined. But he didn't go down without a fight. He spent the next 4 years tied up in brutal litigation trying to void his contract. The case went all the way to the California Supreme Court, and Norton lost hard. By 1858, Joshua Norton, once the toast of the town, was bankrupt. The banks took his real estate. They took his businesses. He lost his fortune, his social standing, and his home. He moved into a dingy, cheap boarding house, fell completely off the map, and spent the next year stewing in the absolute brain-melting trauma of going from a millionaire to a peasant because of some bad Peruvian carbs. When a person's entire reality shatters, the human brain does fascinating things to cope. Some people get deeply into religion. Some people move to the woods to go off-grid. Some people start a podcast. Joshua Norton did none of those things. Joshua Norton simply decided that reality was wrong and he was in charge of fixing it. On September 17, 1859, a man walked into the offices of the San Francisco Bulletin. It was Norton, but he didn't look like the wealthy merchant he used to be. He looked a little ragged, deeply serious, and he handed a piece of paper to the editor, demanding that it be published immediately. Now, normally, when a guy who just went bankrupt through a rice scheme walks into a newspaper office demanding you print his manifesto, you call whatever passed for security in 1859, which was probably just a guy named Sully with a wooden club. But George Fitch, the editor of the Bulletin, read the piece of paper, and honestly, it was a slow news day, so he figured, fuck it, let's see what happens. The next day, the Bulletin published this exact proclamation. At the peremptory request and desire of a large majority of the citizens of these United States, I, Joshua Norton, formerly of Algoa Bay, Cape of Good Hope, and now for the last 9 years and 10 months past of San Francisco, California, declare and proclaim myself Emperor of these United States. Did you catch that? At the peremptory request of a large majority of the citizens. He didn't just take the throne, he was insisting we all begged him to take the throne. The absolute balls on this man. He didn't just declare himself emperor, he ordered the representatives of the different states to assemble at the Musical Hall of San Francisco to make the necessary alterations to the laws of the Union. Because, the country was kind of a mess and he needed to fix it. Now, what is the logical reaction of a city when a bankrupt former businessman publicly declares himself Emperor of the United States? In Boston or New York, they would have thrown him in an asylum and thrown away the key. But this was San Francisco, the city of gold miners, weirdos, and people who had traveled thousands of miles just to escape normal society. The citizens of San Francisco read the paper over their morning coffee, shrugged, and collectively said, you know what? Good for him. Long live the emperor. And just like that, the gaslighting began. An emperor is nothing without the fit. You can't just walk around in a dirty tweed suit and expect people to bow. You need drip. Norton started out wearing an old, elaborate blue uniform with gold-plated epaulets, supposedly gifted to him by sympathetic officers at the local United States Army post at the Presidio. He wore a beaver hat decorated with a peacock feather and a rosette. He carried a cane and sometimes a saber, just in case he needed to look appropriately menacing while buying a sourdough loaf. And here is where the story shifts from sad guy loses his mind to the greatest con of the 19th century. Because Emperor Norton didn't just play dress up in his bedroom, he hit the streets. He had a kingdom to run. Every day, Norton would patrol the streets of San Francisco. He would inspect the conditions of the sidewalks, check on the cable cars, and monitor the progress of public works. And if a street was in disrepair, he would angrily contact the city government to fix it. And they often did. But ruling a nation isn't cheap. An emperor needs revenue. So Norton instituted his own taxation system. He would walk into a local business, have a pleasant chat with the owner, and casually assess a tax of maybe 50 cents or $3. And people paid it. Why? Because it was brilliant marketing. To the local shops and restaurants, Emperor Norton was the ultimate mascot. If Norton came to your restaurant and ate a meal, you didn't charge him. Instead, he gave you a small printed certificate featuring his imperial seal declaring that your establishment was by appointment to His Imperial Majesty. Restaurant owners would literally frame these certificates and hang them in the window. It was the 1860s version of a verified blue checkmark on Instagram or a 5-star Yelp review from the coolest influencer in town. It drew in tourists, but it wasn't just small change. Norton needed real economic power. So he did what any self-respecting sovereign nation does. He issued his own fiat currency. Norton struck a deal with a local printing press. He designed his own promissory notes, usually in denominations of 50 cents to $10, promising to pay the bearer at 7% interest in the year 1880. These weren't crude doodles on napkins. These were beautifully printed, official-looking banknotes. And the absolute most unhinged part of this entire story? The currency worked. San Francisco businesses accepted Norton's money as legal tender. You could walk into a bar, buy a beer, pay with a Norton dollar, and get change. The banks even honored his checks up to a certain amount. The local economy just seamlessly integrated the imaginary money of a local eccentric because everyone just tacitly agreed to play along. If that isn't the very definition of fiat currency, I don't know what is. Eat your heart out, crypto bros. Emperor Norton invented the altcoin in 1865, and his was actually backed by something. Pure, unadulterated civic pride. You might think that Norton was just a harmless, quiet guy begging for change in a funny hat. Oh, honey, no. Norton was active in geopolitics. He was making moves. Throughout his 21-year reign, Norton issued dozens of imperial decrees, published in newspapers across the city. Remember, the newspapers loved him. Whenever sales were down, they'd just send a reporter to ask the emperor what his thoughts were on foreign policy. Let's review some of his greatest hits, shall we? Number 1. Firing Congress. On October 12, 1859, Norton formally abolished the United States Congress. He declared that they were corrupt, passing terrible laws, and acting entirely out of self-interest. Which, let's be honest, he wasn't wrong. When Congress rudely ignored his decree and continued to meet in Washington, D.C., Norton issued a follow-up order to Major General John E. Wool of the U.S. Army, ordering him to march on Washington, clear the halls of Congress by absolute force, and lock the doors. General Wool, for the record, did not march on Washington, but he did buy the emperor a drink later that week. Number 2, banning political parties. In 1869, Norton grew so disgusted with the endless bickering of the two-party system that he formally abolished the Democratic and Republican parties. Honestly, ahead of his time. Put this man on the ballot today. Number 3, the Frisco fine. If there's one thing that native San Franciscans hate more than anything else in the world, it's people calling their city Frisco. Norton felt this deeply in his soul. In 1872, he issued a decree stating that the word Frisco had no linguistic or other warrant, and anyone caught saying it in his presence would be subjected to a summary fine of $25. That is nearly $800 today. The man protected the brand. But Norton wasn't just a grumpy dictator, he was a visionary. His most famous decrees came in the early 1870s when he ordered the construction of a suspension bridge connecting Oakland to San Francisco. He didn't just casually suggest it, He ordered the citizens of both cities to furnish the funds immediately, outlining exactly where the bridge should go, from Oakland Point through Goat Island, now Yerba Buena Island, and into San Francisco. The newspapers mocked him. Engineers laughed. "It's impossible," they said. "The bay is too deep. The currents are too strong. The old man is crazy." 60 years later, the state of California built the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge. And guess what? They built it in the exact spot, following the exact route that Norton commanded in 1872. He wasn't crazy. He just saw the future. There is actually a massive grassroots movement today to rename the Bay Bridge to the Emperor Norton Bridge, and frankly, I am furious that it hasn't happened yet. The level of respect this man commanded is truly baffling to the modern mind. Whenever Emperor Norton attended a play or a musical performance in San Francisco, the theater management would reserve 3 complimentary balcony seats for him and his 2 dogs, Bummer and Lazarus. Little side note, historians debate if he actually owned these famous stray dogs or if they just followed him around because he smelled like free prime rib, but the legend stands. When Norton entered the theater, the audience, composed of the wealthiest, most powerful people in California, would stand. They would literally rise to their feet in silence until the emperor took his seat. But what happens when the illusion is threatened? What happens when reality tries to punch its way into the fantasy? In 1867, a rookie police officer named Armand Barbier, who clearly was not caught up on the local lore, saw a disheveled man in a ridiculous uniform walking the streets. He arrested Emperor Norton on charges of vagrancy and committed him to an institution for involuntary treatment. The city lost its absolute collective mind. Newspapers wrote scathing editorials. Citizens rioted in the literal streets. Wealthy businessmen threatened to defund the police department. The San Francisco Bulletin wrote an editorial stating, "In what can only be described as the most dastardly of errors, Emperor Norton was arrested today. He has shed no blood, robbed no one, and despoiled no country, which is more than can be said for his fellows in the royal line." The backlash was so severe that the chief of police, Patrick Crowley, had to personally go down to the jail, release Norton, issue a formal public apology, and fire the arresting officer. From that day forward, the chief ordered every police officer in San Francisco to salute Emperor Norton whenever he passed them on the street. But Norton wasn't just a pampered mascot. When push came to shove, the emperor protected his people. The late 1800s were a dark time in California history. Economic depression had led to massive, violent anti-Chinese sentiment. White mobs regularly terrorized Chinatown, burning businesses and attacking immigrants. During one particularly tense night in the 1870s, a massive angry mob formed, intending to storm Chinatown. The police were overwhelmed. The situation was about to turn into a bloodbath. Suddenly, out of the shadows, stepped Emperor Norton. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have an army. He just had his worn-out blue coat, his cane, and an aura of absolute authority. Norton stepped directly between the violent, screaming mob and their targets in Chinatown. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten them. He simply lowered his head, closed his eyes, and began to recite the Lord's Prayer. He just kept repeating it, loudly, over and over again. Now imagine you were an angry, racist rioter. You're fired up, you're ready for violence. And suddenly, the beloved, eccentric grandfather of the city steps in front of you, risking his own life, praying for your soul. It absolutely broke their brains. The mob got awkward. People started shuffling their feet, looking at the ground. Eventually, the shame took over. The mob quietly dispersed, and everyone just went home. Emperor Norton stopped a race riot with nothing but a prayer and the sheer weight of his own bizarre dignity. He truly was the protector of Mexico, the Emperor of the United States, and the guardian of San Francisco. But as with everyone, all reigns must come to an end. On the evening of January 8, 1880, Emperor Norton was walking to a lecture at the California Academy of Sciences. He was well into his 60s now. The uniform was threadbare, the peacock feather was ragged, but his posture was still as straight as an arrow. As he was crossing California Street, right in front of Old St. Mary's Church, he suddenly collapsed. A police officer rushed to his side and tried to flag down a carriage to get him to the hospital, but it was too late. Before a carriage could arrive, Joshua Norton died on the cold pavement. He was gone. When they searched his room at the boarding house, they found exactly what you would expect. No hidden gold, no secret bank accounts. He was utterly, completely broke. He had a couple of dollars, a collection of walking sticks, and an incredibly fake collection of telegrams supposedly from Queen Victoria and the Tsar of Russia, and a drawer full of his own worthless imperial currency. The initial plan was to bury him in a pauper's grave, a simple wooden pine box for a forgotten man. But the city of San Francisco said absolutely the fuck not. The Pacific Club, an association of the wealthiest businessmen in the city, the same guys who used to buy him drinks and pay his 50-cent taxes, stepped in. They paid for a gorgeous rosewood casket. They organized the memorial. The morning of Norton's funeral, January 10, 1880, the city of San Francisco effectively shut down. There was a total eclipse of the sun that day. Because of course there was. Nature itself was mourning the emperor. The line to view his casket stretched for more than 2 miles. Over 30,000 people attended his funeral. To put that in perspective, the entire population of San Francisco at the time was only about 230,000. That means nearly 15% of the entire city dropped what they were doing to say goodbye to a homeless man who thought he was a king. Rich people, poor people, police officers, theater actors, and children all stood shoulder to shoulder to mourn the emperor. He was buried in the Masonic Cemetery, and decades later, when the city moved its graves to Coloma, they reinterred him with full civic honors, complete with a marching band and a brand new granite tombstone that proudly reads, Norton I, Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. So, what is the legacy of Emperor Norton? Was he a madman? Undoubtedly. Was he a grifter? Maybe a little bit. But I think Emperor Norton is something far more profound. He is the ultimate patron saint of embracing your own weirdness. He reminds us that society is just a shared hallucination. Money, status, power, it's all entirely made up. And if it's all made up anyway, why not make up a reality where you are the emperor, your dogs have front row seats to the opera, and you can fire Congress whenever they annoy you? Joshua Norton didn't have an army. He never hurt a single soul. He didn't hoard wealth. He didn't start wars. And he actually cared about the potholes in his city. As the newspapers noted upon his death, he was a far better, kinder ruler than most of the actual monarchs in history. San Francisco didn't just tolerate his delusion, they actively co-authored it. They nurtured it. Because in a harsh, grueling world of gold dust and greed, a little bit of magic, a little bit of theater, and a guy in a really cool hat was exactly what everybody needed. So the next time you feel imposter syndrome creeping in at work, or you feel like you don't belong in that meeting, just channel your inner Joshua Norton. Put on your metaphorical epaulets, issue a decree, and just act like you own the place. If a bankrupt rice merchant can rule America for 21 years, you can absolutely survive that Zoom call. Thanks for watching Audacious History. If you enjoyed learning about the most successful gaslighter of the 19th century, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what your very first decree would be if you were Emperor of the United States. Mine? Banning reply all emails on pain of death. Until next time, stay audacious.